Welcome to Town Talk. I'm Paula Hersey, and with me today is Finance Director Mark Milne. Mark talks taxes. Taxes, property taxes. Everybody has questions.
Yes.
And you have answers. Some folks might have been surprised with the envelope opening this year. Real estate market was incredibly hot through 2021, which is where our values were based upon. So let's talk a little bit about how those values got on the piece of paper, for one thing, and some of the factors that are related to those property tax bills. So let's start at the beginning. How are properties assessed, and why was it based upon the 2021 market?
That's a good question. So in order to set our tax rate every year, we have to reevaluate property values throughout the town, and we have to have a full calendar year's worth of sales data in order to set the valuations. And so for fiscal year 23, the last full year of calendar year sales was calendar year 2021, because we were halfway into calendar year 2022. So we have to use sales data that goes back to 2021. And that was one of the strongest residential real estate markets we've seen in decades. And, probably some of it was influenced by COVID. People getting out of the urban areas, moving to more rural areas, getting out of the cities, wanting to move to places like the Cape. But you saw this happen across the state, across the country, really. And, this isn't an isolated incident for Barnstable. Look at other towns. Look at their valuations of residential property values. Go to their websites. You'll see that a lot of the assessed values for residential property in particular went up significantly, and even more so on waterfront. Those properties commanded even stronger prices during that sales period of 2021. We're probably going to see a similar 2022, maybe not as strong, but it's going to be a strong year in 2022 as well.
Right. And we know with that strong year, it's not that we arbitrarily choose to do this. This is set by the state, right? This is something
we're required.
we
have to do it. And the objective behind all of this is to make sure that everyone pays their equitable share of the property tax levy based on their most current market value of that property. So the way you do that is you change or you reevaluate the assessed values on an annual basis and try to get them as close to market value as you can during that, using that period of time, sales data.
Sure.
We're still 18 months behind the market today, right?
Right.
Because this is 2021 sales data we're using,
Right.
and now we're in January 2023.
Right.
But that's the way it works. And so next year for 2024, we'll use calendar year 2022 sales data to set those values.
Okay. So let's talk about a few things that affect those, not necessarily the values, but also what's on that tax bill. Something that surprised me that I don't always look at because it's out of sight, out of mind, is sometimes my fire district. So there's other things affecting those bills that are added into their Community Preservation Act funds. Talk a little bit about those additional things that are on that tax bill.
Yeah, there are three main components on any given taxpayer's tax bill, and sometimes a fourth. The first three being, of course, the town's tax levy. And then depending upon what fire district you live in, there's a fire district tax levy. And then there's the community preservation tax, which is a 3% surtax on your real estate tax that was voted in by the community over 20 years ago. And then if you have any special assessments for road betterments or sewer betterments, those are on your tax bill as well. So there could be up to 4 different components, and sometimes 5 if you have a couple of special assessments on your tax bill that make up your total tax bill. So when people open up that bill, they usually look at the bottom line. They don't look at the individual components and the change between the two on any given year. But sometimes a significant component of that tax bill is your fire district tax.
Sure, and there were some significant changes in a couple of our fire districts this year.
There was one, the COM Fire District saw a 60% increase in their tax levy. And so that significantly impacted the fire district tax that was included in your tax bill if you live in that district.
Okay.
Because the tax levy went from $9 million to $14.5 million in 1 year.
Right. And we'll just make sure that people understand that COM is Centerville, Osterville, and Marston's Mills.
Yeah.
It's not Katuitt. So with that being said, there is also something called a residential exemption. And this is an interesting piece that folks don't understand, maybe, that is a reduction in their taxes. So explain the residential exemption and some of the nuances of that program and deadlines that might be associated with it.
Sure. So if a homeowner declares Barnstable as their primary residence and they use it for income tax filing purposes, they're allowed to have then what's called a residential exemption applied to that property if they file the necessary paperwork, which will reduce the assessed value before the tax is calculated based on a percentage exemption adopted by our town council.
Okay.
And so we have about half of our property owners qualifying for the residential exemption, a little less than half actually. But if somebody buys a second home and starts filing for income tax purposes from their second home and not their Barnstable home anymore, we don't know about that. So what we have to do periodically is requalify taxpayers. And so we send out about 2,000 letters a year asking people to resubmit their paperwork, verifying that this is the place that they file their federal and state income taxes from so that they can continue to qualify for the exemption. If we don't get that paperwork in our assessing operation by a certain date, we automatically remove the exemption because they may not be entitled to it anymore.
Okay.
We don't want to send the third and fourth quarter tax bills out in December with that exemption on there if they didn't qualify it for anymore.
Okay.
Every now and then, some people don't get that paperwork filed with the assessing office in a timely manner. It doesn't mean you can't still qualify for the residential exemption in that tax year. You'll have until April 1st to submit the proper documentation to assessing, and we can get that back on the property and adjust the fourth quarter tax bill accordingly.
Okay.
So they haven't, if anybody lost, it's important, if you check your tax bill, make sure you still have the residential exemption on there if you had it the previous year. If you lost it and it's not showing up, contact our assessing operation and we can get the paperwork resubmitted and get it back, reinstated on the property if you're still using that for your income tax filing purposes.
Sure. And residential tax exemption it's not like $1,000. It's significant,
Yeah,
right?
it's over $1,000. It's about, I think,
Right.
$1,070 is the value of it now.
Wow.
Because it's based on the average assessed value in town, which is about $752,000, and 20% of that, or about $150,000, gets taken off your assessed value before you are taxed.
Okay.
So
And
it's
is that
significant.
lower or higher than last year?
Higher than last year.
Higher than last
Higher
year.
than last year because of the hot real estate market. Our
Right.
average residential value went up significantly,
Right.
which increased the value of that exemption.
Right. Excellent. That's kind of a little bit more clear, I think, in folks' mind, that they definitely want to check that to make sure that they, number one, qualify for it. If it's not on their tax bill, that they need to call assessing to make sure that they file the necessary paperwork by
April 1st.
April
April
1st.
1st, yeah.
Okay. So moving on from, here's your tax bill, here's what's on your tax bill. What are some of the other pieces, the questions that we're getting right now that you want residents to really understand about their tax bills and about property tax in general?
So again, these values were based on calendar year 21 sales, right? If you think that you're being overassessed, that the new value on your home is too high, then you have until February 1st to file an abatement application with the Board of Assessors to have them take a look at that valuation that we placed on the property. And it's important that they submit documentation, comparable sales data, for example, that occurred in calendar year 2021 for homes that are similar in location, size, quality, for example,
Okay.
and to support their claim that the value is less than what we have it assessed at. And the Board of Assessors will take a look at that,
Okay.
and they'll make a consideration as to whether or not, yes, the value is wrong. We're not perfect. We have over 25,000 residential properties that have to be looked at every single year. And so sometimes we can make mistakes, absolutely. And so it's important for people to take a look at that valuation that's on their tax bill.
Right.
And if they think it's too high, contact the assessor's office before February 1st. That's the deadline.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
coming up. One last question for you. You talk a lot about, checking your tax bill. I want to see a side-by-side comparison, right? I want to see what last year was compared to this year. Like, I kind of, not quite sure whether I'm paying more, paying less. How does that work? Is there some place that I can see that side-by-side comparison?
Sure. So on the town's website, under the property lookup function, which I think is has more hits than any
It
other
does.
area in our website, a taxpayer can call up their property and go to tax information, and it will pop up the current year's tax bill and the prior year's tax bill side by side between town tax levy, fire district tax levy, CPA tax, any special assessments, so they can see year over year what the change was between each component of their tax bill. So that's a new feature we put up there this year at suggestion of our Director of Assessing, Lane Partridge, which was a great suggestion, and the help of our IT department to get it up there on the website.
That's fantastic. We also have a Barnstable 101 assessing tax property video that kind of walks you through all the math. That's not my favorite subject, so you can watch the Barnstable 101 for that. That's available on our town website's channel 18, as well as our YouTube channel. Any last words for folks who, just have questions? I know they can call assessing, right?
Yes, call assessing. They're the group that you want to speak to when it comes to the tax bill. It's you're not talking about the tax bill. People may be unhappy with their tax amount, but it's all based off that value. So call assessing if you have questions about your value.
Right.
Because that's what assessing does. They're responsible for putting the value on the property, not the tax bill. They don't appropriate funds. They don't set the budget. They only deal with valuing property.
Right.
And that's where most of the issues arise is around the valuation that is placed on that property. And we'll take a look at it. They'll even go out on site if necessary to make sure that they have it right.
Right. And one of the other things we want to make sure that folks know is the tax office and assessing are on either side of the first floor of Town Hall, which is wide open for you to come and talk to folks. The nice folks at the tax window, they're just going to take your check. They can't give you that information about assessing. You're going to have to walk down the hall and talk to the assessing department.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, if you want to pay a tax bill or ask a question about what's your outstanding balance, you can't go to assessing. You got to go to the tax office.
Right.
But they're conveniently located side by side.
Excellent. Yeah. Fantastic. I thought that was one of the best explanations that we've heard, and hopefully that helps our residents. Thanks a lot, Mark, for coming in.
Thanks for having me.